Welcome, Kim. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, Deb, and you?
Doing very well. Uh, it's been last 4 years, more than that, we have sat together for this conversation. I think you have covered a lot of water on the bridge,
Yeah,
a lot
yeah,
of distance.
yeah.
But before we go further into specific things you have done in the last 4 years and more, could you give a brief of your background,
Sure.
your work experience, and your broad moments in each sector you have been in?
Oh my goodness, oh my goodness.
So rather than giving
This
us
is where you learn how old I am, Deb.
but give me moments.
Okay, I actually first started as a mental health nurse, and I was working in acute mental health, and I was working with older people with significant schizophrenia, actually. And I saw this group of psychologists do this therapy. They called it remotivation therapy with 75-year-old women. And they took these women down to a house and asked them to clean it. And I thought it was the most abusive thing I've ever seen in my life. So that was a point where I went, well, I will go and do psychology. So I went to uni. I was there 11 years, actually started doing a PhD and in the end took out my master's. But I was fortunate to teach and do a whole bunch of stuff at the unis, and which I loved. I loved that a lot because you were constantly learning and it was a great environment. From there I went into child protection. I was a psychologist in child protection for a while. And then I went to, and that was great. Very huge caseloads, very complex clients, and all the really difficult clients were children or their families were never referred outside the department. So we would do the really complex, hard end cases, which were difficult and yet quite amazing because you got to work with these incredible children. So that was a really interesting point for me in terms of my development. And then I went to work for Anglicare WA actually, as the regional manager in the Great Southern, managing multiple areas. And it was the first time that Anglicare had gone into a matrix management style. So while I was the regional manager, I was working with under managers and I found that really interesting in many ways. So we were able to integrate some services that hadn't been integrated before, and which is, I think, systemically, I'll think in systems. And so for me, it doesn't make sense to have things siloed. Then I was kind of headhunted out of there by Tracy Westerman and spent nearly 11 years all over Australia as working in Indigenous psych services. So we spent a lot of time in New South Wales, Queensland, mostly New South Wales and Queensland, Victoria and Kimberleys, and a little bit of time in Tasmania, but working in really complex, entrenched, psychological, but really community-based issues. And it was a time that there wasn't too many specialists who kind of knew how to work with communities where there'd been multiple trauma, multiple layers of trauma as a child, but then the community experienced traumas. And so we were working in a couple of communities where they had just the most horrendous things happen in there. And we would fly in and out of Perth to go and do that because there just wasn't enough psychologists that were doing that work at that time. Beautiful thing is now there's many more Aboriginal psychologists, and Tracy was an absolute trailblazer, and I learned an awful lot, and I'll be forever grateful. But I got in and out. I just banged my microphone. Sorry, people. I got tired of just travelling, so we were on planes every 2 days, and it was just exhausting. So I came back and started working at Uniting, and it was really an interesting point for me because my family system, I grew up with this whole notion of put up or shut up, which means basically you either accept what's going on and just go with it, or you choose to change it, and you have to make that decision. But if you're choosing to just go along with it, stop complaining. And so my career changes has been really because I couldn't shut up, really. So I'm almost like the accidental CEO. So while I was working with Tracy around Australia, one of the things we used to do was a lot of organisational development within Aboriginal community-controlled organisations or in Aboriginal community health organisations at that time. And learning more and more about how those things worked and what worked and what didn't work kind of really pushed me more into organisational life and perspectives rather than pure psychology. And so basically, I couldn't shut up. So this is how I'm the accidental CEO, because I couldn't shut up. It was almost like the accidental psychologist because I saw something that wasn't okay. And I thought, you either
do something about
do
it.
something or shut up and walk away. And my family don't walk away. So that's how I'm here. And I ended up in Uniting as the Executive Manager of Child and Family Services, and then the CEO at the time was choosing to retire. And the organisation needed to have a transition point that would help that to happen, and that was me. So I was appointed as the Chief Operating Officer at Uniting with the whole aim of transitioning one CEO out and helping the next CEO come in. And which is great because I didn't actually want to be the CEO of Uniting, and I nearly knew I'd had my time there. And so I spent 2 years or 18 months transitioning one person out, working with them, and then transferring the knowledge to the incoming person over another couple of years. And then finished work there and then into Parkerville. Now I'm just turned 5 years at Parkerville as a CEO.
Congrats. Oh, there's so much
That's
to
a long
cover.
story.
So much to cover. There's so much to cover on that.